Commander Zixtar adjusted the neural dampeners around his elongated skull as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the human homeworld. The blue-skinned Velthari had been monitoring Earth for 3 standard cycles now, ever since the primitive species had achieved basic spaceflight. What they discovered made the Galactic Council extremely nervous. Humans were dangerous, not because of their weapons or their technology, which remained laughably primitive compared to the galaxy's established civilizations. No, humans were dangerous because they seemed completely immune to reason and utterly reckless in their pursuit of goals. "Look at these combat records," Zixtar muttered to his aide, Lieutenant Kilmon, while projecting holographic data streams above his desk. Human soldiers continue fighting even when their pain receptors should have shut down their nervous systems completely. They ignore wounds that would incapacitate any civilized species. Kilmon's antenna twitched nervously as she examined the footage. The recording showed human warriors in various conflicts throughout their history, from ancient battlefields to modern warfare. In every instance, humans displayed the same disturbing pattern. They kept fighting long after any rational being would have surrendered or collapsed. "Perhaps their pain receptors are defective, Commander," Kilmon suggested. "Many primitive species evolve with reduced sensitivity to encourage breeding despite harsh conditions." Zixtar's 3 eyes focused on different data streams simultaneously. "That's what we initially theorized. But look at this." He highlighted several medical scans taken by their stealth observation probes. Human pain receptors are actually more sensitive than most species in the galactic database. They should feel agony more intensely than we do, not less. The contradiction puzzled both officers. According to every scientific model the Velthari possessed, a species with heightened pain sensitivity should evolve to be more cautious, more protective of their physical forms. They should avoid conflict, not embrace it with the terrifying enthusiasm humans displayed. "There's something else troubling in these reports," Zixtar continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that made Kilmon lean closer. "Our behavioral analysts have identified over 1,500 distinct human activities that deliberately inflict pain on themselves." Kilmon's skin shifted to a pale yellow, indicating shock. "Self-harm behaviors? Are they mentally unstable as a species? That's what makes it so disturbing. These aren't the actions of damaged individuals. These are common, socially accepted practices. They call them sports, recreation, art, and entertainment. Humans voluntarily subject themselves to pain that would be considered torture by galactic standards." The commander activated another holographic display showing footage of human sporting events, beings throwing themselves at each other with tremendous force, racing vehicles at speeds that guaranteed painful crashes, diving from incredible heights with minimal protection. Each activity resulted in injuries that would hospitalize most galactic species for cycles. Yet humans seem to consider these outcomes acceptable risks. "They even compete to see who can endure the most pain," Zixtar said, his voice filled with a mixture of fascination and horror. "They have contests where the goal is specifically to inflict maximum discomfort on willing participants." Kilmon studied the data with growing unease. "Commander, if humans can tolerate this level of self-inflicted pain for entertainment, what does that mean for our conquest protocols?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every species the Velthari had encountered could be controlled through the simple application of pain. Standard interrogation techniques, behavioral modification programs, and compliance protocols all relied on the universal truth that intelligent beings would do anything to avoid suffering. But humans seem to have broken that fundamental rule of biology and psychology. Our pain-based control methods would be ineffective against them, Zixtar admitted reluctantly. Worse, they might actually enjoy the experience. "Look at this data on their mating rituals." The new holographic display made Kilmon's antenna curl in disgust. Humans engaged in physical activities during reproduction that would be classified as assault by galactic law. Biting, scratching, forceful contact that left visible marks on their skin. Yet the recording showed clear evidence that both participants not only consented to this treatment, but actively sought it out. "They're not just resistant to pain," Kilmon whispered. "They're attracted to it," Zixtar nodded grimly. "The implications are staggering. Every psychological warfare technique we've developed over millennia assumes that pain is a deterrent. But for humans, pain might actually be a motivator." He pulled up historical records from their databases, comparing human behavior to other known species. The Krexnari can withstand significant physical trauma, but they still seek to avoid it. The Moldari have natural armor that reduces pain sensitivity, but they don't deliberately seek out harmful experiences. Humans are unique in the galaxy. What do we recommend to the Council? Kilmon asked. Zixtar was quiet for a long moment, considering their options. The original plan had been to integrate humanity into the Galactic Federation through standard diplomatic and economic pressure, backed by the implied threat of pain-based enforcement if they proved uncooperative. But if humans actually thrived under conditions that would break other species, traditional conquest strategies would need complete revision. We need more data, he finally decided. I want psychological profiles on individual humans, find out if this pain tolerance is truly universal across their species or limited to specific populations. Monitor their daily activities, not just their conflicts. Should we recommend delaying first contact until we understand them better? Absolutely. The last thing we want is to make contact assuming we can control them, only to discover that our control methods actually make them stronger. Zixtar deactivated the holographic displays and turned to face his aide directly. Schedule a meeting with the Xenopsychology Department. I want their best researchers studying human behavior patterns. As Kilmon left to carry out her orders, Zixtar remained in his command center, staring at the small blue planet on his main display. Somewhere on that world, billions of beings existed who seemed to violate every principle of evolutionary psychology his people had developed. For the first time in his career, Commander Zixtar found himself hoping that the Galactic Council would decide humanity was too dangerous to contact at all. Dr. Yelsa checked the calibration on her observation equipment for the third time that morning. As the Velthari Empire's leading xenopsychologist, she had been tasked with conducting detailed behavioral studies of individual humans. Her research station, hidden in an asteroid field just outside the Sol system, gave her the perfect vantage point to monitor Earth without detection. Computer, begin recording session 47, she spoke into her personal log. Subject observation of human pain responses in domestic environments. The massive viewing screen before her displayed a bustling human city. Her advanced sensors could focus on individual beings from this distance, analyzing their biological responses in real time. For weeks, she had been documenting what the humans did during their normal daily routines, and the results challenged everything she thought. She knew about intelligent behavior. Fascinating, she murmured as her scanners locked onto a group of young humans engaged in what their language classified as exercise. The beings were deliberately pushing their bodies beyond comfortable limits, creating microtrauma in their muscle tissue that would require days to heal. Their pain receptors were firing constantly, yet they appeared to be enjoying themselves. Dr. Yelsa's assistant researcher Nexinal monitored the biological readouts with growing bewilderment. Doctor, their endorphin levels are increasing proportionally with their discomfort. It's as if their brains reward them for experiencing pain. Note that observation, Yelsa replied, her excitement evident despite her professional demeanor. Focus on the female running on the mechanical track. Her stress indicators show significant distress, yet she continues the activity voluntarily. They watched as the human female pushed herself harder, sweat pouring from her skin, her breathing labored and painful. By all biological measures, she was suffering. Yet when she finally stopped, her brain chemistry showed patterns associated with pleasure and satisfaction in other species. This contradicts fundamental behavioral psychology, Nexinal said. No species should evolve to seek out pain unless it provides clear survival advantages. Dr. Yelsa adjusted her sensors to examine the humans more closely. Perhaps it does provide advantages we haven't recognized. Look at her muscle density compared to other females her age who don't engage in this behavior. The comparison scans revealed dramatic differences in physical capability. Humans who regularly subjected themselves to exercise-induced pain were significantly stronger, faster, and more resilient than those who avoided such activities. It was as if pain was a tool they used to improve themselves. Computer, scan for other voluntary pain activities in the surrounding area, Yelsa commanded. The results were staggering. Throughout the city, humans were engaging in dozens of activities that caused obvious discomfort. Some were immersing themselves in water heated to temperatures that should have caused tissue damage. Others were exposing their skin to harmful radiation from their star, while lying motionless for extended periods. Groups gathered in buildings filled with loud noise that damaged their hearing, yet they paid currency for the privilege. "Doctor," Nexenal called out, "you need to see this." On a secondary monitor, her assistant had focused on a human medical facility. Inside, humans were voluntarily submitting to procedures that involved cutting into their bodies with sharp instruments. The pain readings were intense, yet the humans remained conscious and cooperative throughout the process. "Are they being tortured?" Yelza asked, though the question felt ridiculous even as she spoke it. "No, they're paying for it. And look at this." Nexenal highlighted the brain scans of humans undergoing the procedures. They show anticipation and satisfaction patterns, not fear or distress. Dr. Yelsa spent the rest of the day cataloging similar behaviors across different human populations. She found that humans regularly consumed substances that caused burning sensations in their mouths, deliberately exposed themselves to freezing temperatures, and even paid others to cause them controlled injuries in combat training. The evidence suggests that humans have somehow evolved to use pain as a positive stimulus, she concluded in her report that evening. They appear to have developed neural pathways that convert certain types of suffering into pleasure or satisfaction. Her research was interrupted by an urgent communication from the observation post's sensor array operator. "Dr. Yelsa, we're detecting some unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface. There's a human engaging in a behavior we haven't cataloged yet." She rushed to the main observation deck, where sensor operator Kilthera had already locked onto the anomalous readings. The display showed a small human establishment filled with unusual equipment and bright lights. "What am I looking at?" Yelsa asked. "We're not entirely sure," Kilthera admitted. "The human subject entered this facility approximately 1 hour ago. Since then, they've been subjected to repeated needle punctures over extensive areas of their skin. The pain indicators are unlike anything we've recorded." Dr. Yelsa leaned closer to examine the readings. The human on screen was lying still while another human operated a device that appeared to be deliberately damaging their skin in precise patterns. The pain levels were extraordinary, far exceeding anything they had observed during human exercise or medical procedures. "Is this some form of torture?" Nexenal whispered. "Wait," Yelsa said, noting something strange in the subject's biological readings. "Look at their stress hormones. They're elevated, but not in patterns consistent with distress. And their brain activity." She paused, double-checking the sensors. "They're experiencing something similar to the meditation states we observed in human religious practices." The 3 Velthari scientists watched in fascinated silence as the procedure continued. The human remained perfectly still despite obvious agony, occasionally even conversing casually with the operator. After several hours, the procedure concluded, and the human examined the results in a reflective surface. What they saw defied comprehension. The repeated needle punctures had created patterns in the human skin. Intricate designs had been permanently embedded into their flesh using colored substances. The human appeared extremely pleased with the results, paying currency to the operator and scheduling another appointment for additional work. "They're deliberately scarring themselves," Yelsa breathed, "for aesthetic purposes." "The pain readings during that procedure exceeded our military interrogation thresholds," Kilthera reported, yet the subject treated it as a routine appointment. Dr. Yelza realized she was witnessing something that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity. This wasn't just pain tolerance or the ability to endure suffering for survival. This was a species that had evolved to find beauty and meaning in experiences that would traumatize most other intelligent life. "Send an immediate report to command," she ordered. "Humans don't just tolerate pain better than we thought. They actively seek it out and transform it into art, personal expression, and social bonding." As she compiled her observations, Dr. Yelza couldn't shake the feeling that her people had made a critical error in their assessment of human psychology. They had assumed that because humans felt pain intensely, they could be controlled through its application, but the evidence suggested the opposite might be true. If humans voluntarily subjected themselves to this level of suffering for personal satisfaction, what would they be willing to endure to protect what they truly valued? Dr. Yelsa couldn't sleep. For 3 days since witnessing the needle procedure, she had been consumed with questions about human psychology that seemed to have no logical answers. She had reviewed the footage dozens of times, analyzed every biological reading, and consulted with specialists across the Velthari scientific community. None of them could explain what they had observed. "Computer, display comparative pain threshold analysis," she commanded as she entered her laboratory at the start of another research cycle. The holographic data showed side-by-side readings from the human subject during the needle procedure and a Velthari soldier during standard military conditioning. The human had endured pain levels that would have caused the trained warrior to lose consciousness, yet they had remained alert and communicative throughout the entire experience. Her assistant Nexinal arrived carrying a steaming cup of bitter root tea, a sign that he had also been losing sleep over their discoveries. "Doctor, I've been thinking about the social implications of what we witnessed." "Go on," Yelsa encouraged, accepting the warm beverage gratefully. The human didn't appear to be under any form of coercion. They scheduled the appointment willingly, paid for the service, and seemed satisfied with the outcome. This suggests that the painful procedure fulfilled some psychological or social need. Dr. Yelsa nodded thoughtfully. "I've been reaching the same conclusion. But what need could possibly be served by such extreme self-inflicted trauma?" She activated the observation array again, focusing on the same establishment they had monitored earlier. "Let's see if we can find more examples of this behavior." The facility was busy with humans of various ages and physical configurations. Each one underwent similar procedures, though the patterns and duration varied significantly. Some sessions lasted mere minutes, while others continued for several hours. The pain levels fluctuated accordingly, but in every case, the subjects endured far more discomfort than any rational being should tolerate voluntarily. "Look at this," Nexinal called out, highlighting one particular human who had arrived for their appointment. "This subject has already undergone the procedure multiple times. Their skin shows evidence of extensive previous needlework." The human in question was an elderly male whose exposed skin displayed intricate patterns covering most of his visible body. The designs were complex and varied, suggesting years of accumulated procedures. Yet he had returned for additional work, choosing to experience the agony again despite already possessing whatever benefit the process provided. "It's not just toleration of pain," Yelsa realized. "They're developing an addiction to it." But as she continued to observe, that explanation also proved inadequate. The human's biological responses didn't match known patterns of addictive behavior. His brain chemistry was different from beings dependent on chemical stimulants or other compulsive activities. "Doctor, I'm detecting unusual neural activity in the subject's frontal cortex," Nexinal reported. "The pattern resembles what we see during deep meditation or religious experiences." Yelsa increased the resolution of their neural scanners, examining the human's brain activity in real time as the needle procedure began. What she discovered challenged her understanding of how intelligent minds should function. The pain signals are being processed through the same neural pathways humans use for meaningful experiences, she said slowly, hardly believing her own readings. "They're not just enduring the discomfort. They're transforming it into something spiritually significant." The observation became even more fascinating when other humans in the facility began showing interest in the elderly male's session. They gathered around to watch, offering encouragement and expressing admiration for both the artwork being created and his ability to withstand the procedure. "It's a social bonding activity," Nexinal observed. "They're sharing the experience collectively." "More than that," Yelsa corrected. "Look at the neural patterns in the observers. They're experiencing a form of vicarious satisfaction from witnessing someone else's voluntary suffering." The implications were staggering. Not only did humans deliberately subject themselves to extreme pain for personal and artistic reasons, but their entire social structure seemed designed to celebrate and honor such behavior. The ability to endure suffering wasn't just tolerated, it was actively respected and admired by their peers. Over the following days, Dr. Yelsa expanded her research to examine similar establishments across the planet. The needle art procedure, which humans called tattooing, was practiced in virtually every culture and geographic region. The specific patterns and techniques varied, but the fundamental concept remained constant. Humans voluntarily endured significant pain to permanently mark their bodies with meaningful designs. "I've identified over 30,000 facilities dedicated exclusively to this activity," she reported to Commander Zixtar during their weekly briefing. "The practice appears to be deeply integrated into human culture across all social and economic levels." 30,000? The commander repeated, his three eyes blinking in rapid succession. Are you certain these readings are accurate? Confirmed through multiple sensor arrays. But that's not the most disturbing aspect of my findings. Yelsa activated a holographic display showing demographic data from her observations. Approximately 47% of human adults have undergone this procedure at least once. Many return repeatedly for additional work. Commander Zixtar's skin shifted to a deep purple, indicating extreme agitation. Nearly half their population voluntarily subjects themselves to torture for aesthetic purposes. It goes deeper than aesthetics, Commander. The patterns they choose often carry personal, cultural, or spiritual significance. They use pain as a method of storytelling, identity formation, and emotional processing. Some humans mark themselves to commemorate important life events, honor deceased relatives, or declare their allegiance to social groups. You're describing a species that has weaponized suffering, Kilmon observed from her position at the Tactical Analysis Station. They've turned one of the galaxy's most effective control mechanisms into a form of personal empowerment. Dr. Yelsa nodded grimly. The psychological profiles are unlike anything in our databases. Humans who undergo these procedures often report increased confidence, sense of personal achievement, and social connection. They're literally using pain to improve their mental health. What are the military implications? Commander Zixtar asked. Catastrophic for our existing protocols. If humans can find spiritual fulfillment and personal growth through voluntary suffering, traditional interrogation and compliance techniques would be completely ineffective. Worse, they might actually strengthen human resistance to our authority. The command center fell silent as the full scope of the problem became clear. Every aspect of Velthari expansion strategy relied on the assumption that intelligent beings would surrender rather than endure prolonged discomfort. But humans had somehow evolved beyond that fundamental limitation. There's something else, Dr. Yelsa continued reluctantly. I've observed humans who use these needle procedures to cover scars from previous injuries or traumatic experiences. They deliberately choose to experience new pain as a way of healing from old suffering. They use torture as therapy, Kilmon whispered. From their perspective, it isn't torture. They view controlled voluntary pain as fundamentally different from unwanted suffering. The distinction appears to be crucial to their psychological well-being. Commander Zixtar stared at the data projections with the expression of someone realizing their entire worldview was fundamentally flawed. How many other human behaviors have we misinterpreted based on our assumptions about pain psychology? The emergency session of the Galactic Council's Xenological Assessment Committee convened 3 cycles after Dr. Yelsa's initial report about human tattooing behaviors. Representatives from 12 major civilizations gathered virtually, their holographic forms filling the council chamber as they reviewed the disturbing intelligence from Earth. Ambassador Thekmar of the crystalline Zephyrians spoke first, his geometric form pulsing with agitated light patterns. These findings contradict every established principle of evolutionary psychology. No species should develop voluntary pain-seeking behaviors without clear survival advantages. The survival advantages are becoming apparent, Dr. Yelsa responded from her position at the central podium. Humans who regularly subject themselves to controlled pain demonstrate superior stress resistance, enhanced problem-solving under pressure, and stronger social cohesion. Their willingness to endure suffering voluntarily appears to prepare them for involuntary suffering later. High Counselor Mektoth, representing the Amphibian Qualnari Federation, activated her translation matrix with obvious skepticism. You're suggesting that humans deliberately traumatize themselves to build psychological resilience? The evidence is extensive and consistent across all human populations we've studied. Yelsa projected new holographic displays showing comparative data from dozens of human cultures. The tattooing behavior is just one example of a broader pattern. Humans regularly engage in activities specifically designed to test their pain tolerance. The assembled representatives examined footage of human religious ceremonies involving deliberate self-injury, sporting events where physical trauma was expected, and coming-of-age rituals that required enduring significant discomfort. Each example demonstrated the same psychological profile. Humans actively sought experiences that would be classified as torture by galactic standards. Perhaps most disturbing, Yelsa continued, is how they use these experiences to build trust and cooperation. Humans who endure pain together form stronger social bonds than those who share comfortable experiences. General Voxnell of the militaristic Kraton Empire leaned forward aggressively. Are you implying that causing pain would actually strengthen human resistance to our authority? Not implying. Stating directly. Yelsa's response sent ripples of alarm through the assembled delegates. Humans who undergo voluntary suffering often report feeling more capable of handling future challenges. They develop what their psychologists term grit. Oh, a form of mental toughness that makes them more determined rather than more compliant. Ambassador Scylla Rendi from the Peaceful Harmony Collective expressed confusion through her elaborate tentacle gestures. But surely there must be limits to this aberrant behavior. No being could maintain such attitudes indefinitely. Dr. Yelsa called up a new set of data, focusing on long-term psychological studies of humans who had extensive tattooing. I've been monitoring subjects for over a standard year now. Those with the most extensive needle art experience show increased pain tolerance over time, not decreased. They appear to develop a form of resistance that extends beyond physical discomfort to emotional and psychological stress. This is impossible, declared researcher Prime, next Kala of the Logical Meridian Assembly. Pain exists as a survival mechanism to prevent harmful behavior. Species that ignore pain signals should not survive long enough to develop advanced civilizations. That's what makes humans so dangerous, Commander Zixtar interjected from his position at the tactical briefing station. They haven't eliminated pain sensitivity. They've learned to reinterpret it as information rather than instruction. The distinction was subtle but crucial. Most galactic species experienced pain as an overwhelming directive to stop whatever was causing the discomfort. Humans seemed to experience the same intensity of sensation but processed it as data about their situation, rather than commands for their behavior. We've observed human soldiers continuing to fight effectively, while suffering injuries that would incapacitate any of our warriors, Zixtar continued. They acknowledge the pain, assess its implications, and make rational decisions about whether to continue their actions based on larger strategic considerations. High Admiral Corthes of the Hegemony Defense Fleet activated his threat assessment protocols. If humans can separate pain sensation from behavioral response, our psychological warfare capabilities are useless against them. Worse than useless, Dr. Yelsa corrected. Our attempts to control them through pain might actually demonstrate that we don't understand their psychology, making us appear weak and ineffective. She projected a recording from the previous day showing a human undergoing an extensive tattooing session that lasted over 8 hours. The subject remained alert and conversational throughout the procedure, even discussing complex philosophical topics with the artist performing the work. During this session, the pain levels exceeded what we use for emergency interrogation of captured enemies, Yelsa explained. Yet the subject treated it as a relaxing social experience. They scheduled another session for the following week. The council chamber erupted in concerned discussions as representatives calculated the implications for their various expansion and control strategies. Species that had built their power on superior technology suddenly realized that technological advantages might be meaningless against beings who couldn't be intimidated through suffering. What about their response to the pain of others? Asked diplomat Velthara of the Empathic Consortium. Surely they must retain normal protective responses when witnessing suffering in their social groups. Dr. Yelsa's expression darkened as she accessed another set of recordings. That's perhaps the most disturbing aspect of their psychology. Humans often bond more strongly with individuals they've seen endure pain with dignity. They admire stoicism and interpret visible suffering as evidence of character strength. The footage showed human military units where members had deliberately undergone matching tattoos as symbols of group loyalty. The shared experience of pain had created what human psychologists called unit cohesion, a form of mutual trust that made the groups nearly impossible to break through. Conventional psychological manipulation, they're immune to divide and conquer strategies, General Voxnell realized.
Shared suffering makes them more united, not more fractured. Furthermore, Yelsa added, humans who witness others enduring pain often feel motivated to match or exceed that level of tolerance.
It becomes a form of positive peer pressure that encourages greater resilience across entire populations. Ambassador Thekmar's crystalline form shifted to deep red warning patterns. We're describing a species that becomes stronger under stress, more united under pressure, and more determined when faced with suffering. How did such a psychological profile evolve? Dr. Yelsa had been researching that question extensively. Human evolutionary history suggests they faced unusually harsh environmental pressures over extended periods. Survival required not just avoiding pain, but actively persevering through it. Those who developed the ability to find meaning and strength in suffering were more likely to reproduce successfully. The implications for first contact protocols are clear, High Counselor Mechtoth concluded grimly. Traditional diplomatic pressure and economic sanctions would be interpreted as challenges rather than deterrents. Any demonstration of force would likely increase human resistance rather than encouraging compliance, Commander Zixtar agreed. We would essentially be providing them with evidence that we view them as threats, which could unite their entire species against us. The session concluded with a unanimous decision to delay any contact with humanity until new protocols could be developed. As the various representatives disconnected from the conference, Dr. Yelsa remained in the empty chamber, staring at the final image on her display. A human child receiving their first small tattoo as part of a cultural ceremony, smiling proudly despite obvious discomfort. For the first time in her career, she wondered if the galaxy might need to learn from humans rather than the other way around. 2 months after the emergency council session, Dr. Yelsa had expanded her research team to include specialists from across the galaxy. The Human Psychology Research Initiative now operated from a massive observation platform equipped with the most advanced sensors available. What they discovered made their previous findings seem almost mundane in comparison. Doctor, you need to review the latest behavioral analysis from Sector 7, called Dr. Rex Nari, the newest addition to her team. The elderly Morgathian's expertise in extreme psychology had proven invaluable in understanding human motivations. Yelsa activated the primary display, showing footage from a human facility that defied classification by any known standards. Inside, humans were deliberately subjecting themselves to pain levels that exceeded their military torture protocols, yet paying substantial amounts of currency for the privilege. What exactly am I observing? She asked, studying the biological readouts with growing disbelief. The humans call it extreme body modification, Rex Nari explained. They're using advanced surgical techniques to permanently alter their physical appearance through procedures that cause extraordinary levels of trauma. The footage showed humans undergoing surgical implantation of foreign objects beneath their skin, deliberate scarification that created raised patterns across entire limbs, and modifications to their bone structure that required months of healing. Each procedure involved pain levels that would kill most galactic species through neurological shock. The fascinating aspect, Rex Nari continued, is that these aren't medical procedures designed to repair damage. They're purely aesthetic choices driven by personal expression and cultural identity. Dr. Yelsa examined the neural activity scans from subjects undergoing these extreme modifications. Their brain patterns show the same spiritual fulfillment we observed during tattooing, but magnified significantly. They're achieving altered states of consciousness through voluntary surgical trauma. Her assistant, Nexinal, who had been monitoring human internet communications, added another disturbing element to their understanding. Doctor, I've discovered that humans document and share their painful experiences through electronic networks. They create detailed records of their suffering and distribute them for others to observe and appreciate. They're teaching each other to endure greater levels of pain? Yelsa asked. More than that, they're competing to see who can withstand the most extreme procedures. They've created social hierarchies based on their ability to voluntarily suffer. The observation team spent the following weeks cataloging the full scope of human pain-seeking behaviors. They discovered underground societies dedicated to exploring the limits of conscious suffering, artistic movements that used physical trauma as creative expression, and philosophical schools that taught pain acceptance as the path to enlightenment. Look at this data from their historical records, called researcher Kilthex from the archive station. Humans have been practicing voluntary pain rituals for thousands of years. This isn't a recent development or cultural aberration. The historical analysis revealed that every major human civilization had developed some form of deliberate pain endurance as part of their cultural practices. Religious ceremonies, warrior training, coming-of-age rituals, and artistic expression all incorporated voluntary suffering as essential elements. They've built entire belief systems around the transformative power of pain, Dr. Rexnari observed. Some human religions teach that voluntary suffering brings practitioners closer to divine understanding. Dr. Yelsa realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. We're not just studying an unusual species. We're observing a completely different evolutionary path for intelligence development. She called up comparative analysis charts showing psychological development across known civilizations. Every other species had evolved to minimize suffering and maximize comfort as signs of successful adaptation. Humans had somehow evolved to seek meaning and growth through controlled exposure to trauma. The military implications are beyond our current response capabilities, admitted Colonel Zexanara, the Velthari military liaison assigned to the research project. Our psychological warfare specialists have concluded that standard intimidation tactics would be counterproductive against this species. Have they considered enhanced approaches? Yelsa asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. They've run simulations using pain levels that should theoretically overwhelm any biological nervous system. The models suggest that humans would either find ways to endure the experience or develop psychological techniques to transform it into something positive. Dr. Yelsa accessed footage from a particularly extreme human modification procedure she had observed the previous week. The subject had undergone surgical implantation of magnetic objects beneath their skin, allowing them to interact with electromagnetic fields through direct neural stimulation. The pain during healing had been extraordinary, yet the human expressed profound satisfaction with their enhanced capabilities. They're not just enduring pain for aesthetic reasons, she realized. They're using it as a tool for physical and mental enhancement. Doctor, Nexanal called out urgently. I'm detecting something unusual in the deep space monitoring array. Yelsa rushed to the sensor station, where her assistant was tracking energy signatures from the edge of the solar system. What am I looking at? Human spacecraft. They're conducting what appears to be a deep space mission beyond their normal operational range. The observation team focused their sensors on the human vessel, analyzing the crew's biological responses during their journey. What they discovered added another layer to their understanding of human psychology. The crew is voluntarily subjecting themselves to conditions that cause continuous low-level pain, Rexnari reported. Radiation exposure, gravitational stress, psychological isolation. They're choosing to endure suffering to achieve their exploration goals. But look at their neural patterns, Yelsa pointed out. They're not just tolerating the discomfort. They're experiencing it as confirmation that they're pushing important boundaries. The human space mission became a case study in how their species approached challenges that other civilizations would consider impossible. Rather than waiting for technology that could eliminate the suffering involved in deep space travel, they had chosen to develop psychological techniques for finding meaning in the unavoidable pain. They've turned exploration itself into a form of voluntary suffering, Colonel Zexnara observed. They accept that meaningful achievements require enduring significant discomfort. Dr. Yelsa compiled her latest findings into a comprehensive report for the Galactic Council. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans had evolved psychological mechanisms that not only tolerated pain, but actively transformed it into positive experiences. They used controlled suffering as a tool for personal growth, social bonding, artistic expression, spiritual development, and technological advancement. We need to completely revision our understanding of what makes a species dangerous, she concluded in her final analysis. Humans aren't threatening because they're aggressive or technologically superior. They're threatening because they've solved the fundamental problem that limits all other civilizations, the fear of suffering. As she prepared to transmit her report, Dr. Yelsa couldn't shake the feeling that her research had uncovered something that would change the galaxy forever. If humans could teach other species to overcome their fear of pain, it would revolutionize everything from medical treatment to space exploration. But it would also eliminate the primary tool that powerful civilizations used to maintain control over weaker ones. The question was no longer whether humans were dangerous to galactic stability. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for the psychological revolution that contact with humanity would inevitably bring. The emergency session of the Galactic Supreme Council was unlike any in recorded history. For the first time in 3 millennia, every member civilization had sent their highest-ranking officials to attend in person rather than through holographic projection. The ancient council chamber, carved from a single asteroid and located at the Galactic Center, buzzed with nervous energy as representatives arrived from across known space. Grand Chancellor Mordain called the assembly to order with the ceremonial chimes that had opened council sessions since the founding of galactic civilization. His ancient form, sustained by technology that had kept him alive for over 1,000 years, commanded respect from beings who themselves were considered immortal by their own species' standards. We convene today to address the human situation. His voice echoed through the chamber's acoustic enhancement system. Dr. Yelsa's research has forced us to confront fundamental assumptions about intelligence, civilization, and the nature of power itself. Dr. Yelsa stood at the central podium, surrounded by holographic displays containing months of accumulated data about human behavior. The weight of her responsibility was enormous. Her findings would determine the future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Honored representatives, she began, my team has concluded that humans represent a paradigm shift in evolutionary development. They have solved problems that we believed were unsolvable and overcome limitations we thought were universal. She activated a display showing comparative psychological profiles across dozens of species. Every known civilization develops certain predictable characteristics: risk aversion, comfort seeking, pain avoidance, and hierarchical structures based on the ability to provide security and eliminate suffering. The assembled delegates nodded in agreement. These were the basic principles upon which all galactic societies had been built. Humans have evolved beyond these constraints, Yelsa continued. They actively seek out challenges that other species avoid, find personal fulfillment through voluntary hardship, and create social structures that celebrate rather than eliminate risk and discomfort. Fleet Admiral Torgas of the Hegemony Defense Forces interrupted with obvious agitation. Dr. Yelsa, you're describing a species that could destabilize every established government in the galaxy. If other civilizations learned human psychological techniques, our entire power structure could collapse. That's exactly what I'm describing, Yelsa confirmed. Humans represent an existential threat to traditional authority because they've developed immunity to the primary tools of social control. She called up recordings from recent human sporting events, showing individuals willingly subjecting themselves to extreme physical trauma for no reward other than personal satisfaction and social recognition. The pain levels involved exceeded what most species used for criminal punishment, yet humans lined up to participate. Their entire culture is built around the principle that meaningful achievement requires embracing difficulty rather than avoiding it, she explained. They don't just tolerate necessary suffering, they actively seek out unnecessary suffering to prepare themselves for future challenges. Counselor Vexithaler of the Wisdom Consortium, representing the galaxy's oldest and most intellectually advanced civilization, spoke with the authority of someone whose species had guided galactic development for millions of years. Dr. Yelsa, you're suggesting that humans have discovered psychological techniques that could benefit all species. Perhaps we should consider learning from them rather than viewing them as a threat. The suggestion sent shockwaves through the assembly. The Wisdom Consortium had never acknowledged that any younger species might possess superior knowledge or capabilities. I've considered that possibility extensively, Yelsa replied. The benefits would be enormous. Humans have demonstrated that voluntary pain tolerance can enhance problem-solving abilities, increase stress resistance, improve social cooperation, and accelerate technological development. She projected data showing human advancement rates compared to other civilizations at similar development stages. Humans have achieved in centuries what typically requires millennia. Their willingness to endure short-term suffering for long-term benefits has accelerated their progress exponentially. But consider the risks, warned Security Chief Nex Malar of the Preservation Council. If we introduce human psychology to our populations, we could lose the ability to maintain social order. Our citizens might begin questioning authority, taking dangerous risks, and refusing to accept traditional hierarchies. The debate that followed revealed the depth of the crisis humanity represented. Progressive representatives argued for careful study and potential integration of human techniques. Conservative factions demanded immediate quarantine or elimination of the threat. Military commanders expressed concern about their ability to maintain discipline if their soldiers learned to view pain as a positive experience. There's another factor we haven't adequately considered, interjected Ambassador Kilreth of the Diplomatic Corps. Humans will eventually achieve interstellar travel on their own. When that happens, they'll make contact whether we're ready or not. Dr. Yelsa nodded grimly. Our projections suggest they'll develop faster-than-light travel within 50 standard years, possibly sooner. Their approach to technological development follows the same pattern as their personal psychology. They're willing to take risks and endure hardships that other species avoid. What happens when they encounter our established trade routes and territorial boundaries? Asked Trade Commissioner Zalforth. Will they respect galactic law and customs? Based on their historical patterns, humans tend to challenge rather than accept arbitrary authority, Yelsa admitted. They're likely to question why certain territories are off limits or why trade agreements exist if they weren't part of the negotiations. The revelation that humans might not automatically defer to established galactic civilization created another wave of concern. Most species were grateful to be accepted into existing structures and worked diligently to avoid disrupting established order. Humans appeared likely to demand explanations and potentially insist on equal treatment, despite their newcomer status. We need to address the fundamental question, Grand Chancellor Mordain announced. Do we treat humans as a threat to be contained or as a potential asset to be cultivated? The vote that followed was closer than anyone anticipated. After hours of debate, the Council reached a narrow decision to pursue careful, limited contact with humanity rather than maintaining indefinite isolation or taking aggressive action. Dr. Yelsa will lead a select team in developing first contact, protocols specifically designed for human psychology. The Grand Chancellor announced, "We will approach them as equals rather than subjects, acknowledging their unique capabilities while protecting galactic stability." As the representatives dispersed to return to their home systems, Dr. Yelsa remained in the empty chamber, contemplating the magnitude of her new responsibility. She had to design a first contact scenario that would satisfy human curiosity and independence, while preventing cultural contamination that could destabilize centuries of galactic civilization. For the first time since beginning her research, she realized that the biggest challenge wouldn't be understanding humans. It would be helping the rest of the galaxy understand that the age of easy answers and simple solutions was coming to an end. The universe was about to become a much more complicated place, and Dr. Yelsa wasn't entirely sure that was a bad thing. Her personal logs from that evening contained a single cryptic entry. Perhaps the galaxy has been too comfortable for too long. Humans might be exactly what we need, whether we want them or not. 3 years after the Galactic Council's historic decision, Dr. Yelsa stood aboard the flagship of the first official diplomatic mission to Earth. The massive vessel maintained a respectful distance from the human homeworld, while she made final preparations for the most important, first, contact in galactic history. Her team had spent those 3 years developing revolutionary diplomatic protocols, based entirely on human psychological principles. Instead of the traditional approach of demonstrating superior power and offering conditional acceptance into galactic society, they would present themselves as equals seeking mutual understanding and cooperation. Dr. Yelsa, "We're receiving responses to our initial communication," reported communications specialist Lordenk. "The humans have agreed to meet, but their terms are unusual." She examined the human response with curiosity rather than concern. After years of studying their psychology, she had learned to expect unconventional approaches to everything. They want to conduct the first meeting on the surface of their planet, in a location they describe as challenging environmental conditions, Lordenk continued. They've specifically requested that our delegation be prepared for what they call physical discomfort during the proceedings. Dr. Yelsa smiled, recognizing the pattern immediately. They're testing our commitment to treating them as equals. If we're willing to endure their preferred conditions for the meeting, it demonstrates respect for their cultural values. "Are we actually going to accept these terms?" asked Security Chief Vaxnell, who had been hoping for a controlled meeting aboard the diplomatic vessel. "Absolutely," Yelsa replied. This is exactly the kind of challenge humans would embrace themselves. If we want to establish credible relations with them, we need to demonstrate that we understand their perspective. The location humans selected for first contact was a mountainous region on their primary continent, at an altitude that would cause respiratory stress for most galactic species. The temperature fluctuated between uncomfortably cold and barely tolerable, with atmospheric conditions that made every breath a conscious effort. "Perfect," Yelsa murmured as their landing craft touched down in the designated area. "They've chosen conditions that would normally be considered a diplomatic insult. But from their perspective, it's an honor to share something they find personally meaningful." The human delegation was already waiting when the galactic team emerged from their vessel. Dr. Yelsa was struck by how comfortable the humans appeared in conditions that were causing her own team visible distress, despite their environmental suits. The lead human negotiator, a middle-aged female with intricate tattoos covering her visible skin, approached with the confident stride of someone completely at ease in the harsh environment. "Welcome to Earth," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture that Yelsa had studied extensively. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, and I have to admit, we're all curious about why you chose to study us for so long before making contact." The directness of the question surprised even Yelsa, who had prepared for human forthrightness. "Dr. Chen, we needed to understand your species before we could develop appropriate diplomatic protocols. Your psychological profile is unique among known galactic civilizations." "Unique how?" asked another human delegate, this one displaying ritual scarification that Yelsa recognized as a form of artistic expression involving deliberate, controlled injury. "You've evolved beyond the fear of suffering," Yelsa replied honestly. "Every other species we've encountered can be controlled through the threat or application of pain. You've somehow learned to transform pain into a positive experience." The human delegation exchanged glances that Yelsa's team couldn't interpret. Then Dr. Chen surprised everyone by laughing. "You've been watching our tattoo parlors, haven't you?" she asked with obvious amusement. "I wondered when someone would notice how much we're willing to endure for our art." "Among other behaviors," Yelsa admitted, "we observe that humans regularly subject themselves to controlled suffering for personal growth, social bonding, spiritual development, and creative expression." "And that made you nervous," Dr. Chen observed. "It made us reconsider everything we thought we knew about intelligence and civilization," Yelsa corrected. "Your approach to pain management has implications that extend far beyond individual psychology." As the formal negotiations began, the galactic team discovered that their years of preparation had been essential. Humans approached diplomacy the same way they approached everything else, directly, honestly, and with complete willingness to endure discomfort if it led to meaningful results. "We want to join galactic civilization," Dr. Chen stated early in the discussions, "but we're not interested in being junior partners or following rules we had no voice in creating." The statement would have been considered insulting by traditional diplomatic standards, but Yelsa recognized it as typically human directness. "We anticipated that response," she replied. "The Galactic Council has authorized me to offer humanity full membership with voting rights equal to any other civilization." The surprise on the human faces was genuine and gratifying. "Just like that?" asked the human military representative, a heavily scarred individual whose pain tolerance had clearly been tested repeatedly throughout their career. "Your species has capabilities that could benefit everyone," Yelsa explained. "We're hoping you might be willing to share your techniques for pain management and stress resistance with other civilizations." "In exchange for what?" Dr. Chen asked, demonstrating the human tendency to look for hidden costs in seemingly generous offers. "Access to galactic technology, scientific knowledge, and trade networks," Yelsa replied. "Plus the opportunity to explore regions of space that would take you centuries to reach on your own." The negotiations continued for several days, with both sides discovering that their extensive preparation had created a foundation for genuine mutual respect. Humans appreciated the galactic team's willingness to meet in challenging conditions, while the aliens found human directness refreshing after millennia of elaborate diplomatic protocol. "There's one thing I need to understand," Dr. Chen said during a break in the formal proceedings. "Why did you decide to approach us as equals rather than trying to control us through superior technology?" Yelsa considered her response carefully. because we realized that control is an illusion when dealing with beings who aren't afraid of suffering. You can't threaten people who voluntarily undergo experiences that we would consider torture. So you decided to try friendship instead? We decided to try honesty, Yelsa corrected. We need what you've developed psychologically, and you need what we've developed technologically. Neither of us can force the other to share. So cooperation is the only logical approach. The final agreement established humanity as a full member of galactic civilization with unprecedented autonomy and influence. In exchange, humans agreed to establish training centers where other species could learn pain tolerance techniques, stress management, and what humans called mental toughness. As the diplomatic mission prepared to return to galactic space, Dr. Yelsa reflected on how profoundly her understanding had changed. Humans weren't dangerous because they were aggressive or militaristic. They were revolutionary because they had evolved beyond the fundamental fears that limited other species. Dr. Yelsa, Dr. Chen called out as the galactic team prepared to depart. There's something you should know about the location we chose for these meetings. What's that? This is where we bring our children when they need to learn that discomfort is temporary, but achievement is permanent. We wanted you to see us in a place that represents our values. As their ship departed Earth's atmosphere, Yelsa realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could fully predict. Humans wouldn't just adapt to galactic civilization, they would transform it. And for the first time in her career, she was looking forward to experiencing that transformation. Even though she knew it would be uncomfortable after all, she had learned from the best teachers in the galaxy that the most meaningful changes always involve a little pain.